Hi.
Hey, you can hear me?
Yep.
So yeah, we're currently just viewing a preload screen. I don't know if you can see it.
Hmm.
And I can stop screen sharing whenever you feel ready. We'll give people a few minutes to come in.
Okay. I might need you to ask questions in the group.
Yeah, I'll be here to help.
Few things to fill time if need be, but let's see how it goes.
However I can. Yeah, everyone should be able to hear us now. So
Cool.
um, yeah, if you're comfortable, I'll stop sharing the pre-webinar screen and you can introduce yourself.
Awesome.
Okay. Uh,
Awesome. Um, Hello, everyone who is here. We'll just give maybe 2 minutes for more people to join, and then we will get started. All right, 1 minute down, one more minute.
are you able to pin yourself by chance? So people don't have to look at my face the whole time.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure if you're sharing your screen, it will also hide me, but
Cool. There you go. All right, I think we could get started. So thank you to everyone for joining. Jeff, thanks for setting this up. Today, we're talking about essentially sports sponsorship and influencer marketing, to seemingly very different industries that we believe at Open Sponsorship have kind of come together and essentially are the same thing. And I'm just going to talk through why we think that, how we think about both the universes, and hopefully some tactical stuff that's quite helpful as well. I think we've got half an hour, but my presentation won't take as long, so feel free to ask questions, and let us know your thoughts as well on this whole topic. Right, so sports sponsorship has, and I've got some cues and slides that I'm going to share in between. But sports sponsorship, it's a $60 billion industry. 70% of that is sports. The other 30% is kind of arts and music and other types of sponsorship. So sports is a big part of that. And I think the first sports sponsorship deal was done maybe about 60 years ago. And it's kind of been around for a long time. There's obviously conferences dedicated to sponsorship and whatever it may be, a true form of marketing. And then in the last, I'd say like 8 years, we've seen the growth of influencer marketing itself has gone from basically being a term that you've never heard of to being now, I think estimates are multi-billion-dollar industry. Obviously, you've got kind of influencer marketing managers at most major brands. You've got influencer agencies, and there's been this like growth of influencer. Now, we argue at Open Sponsorship that the original influencer was the athlete, because they were doing deals back in the day, well before, and I'm gonna, let me now share my screen a little bit. So there you are. So, you've got Muhammad Ali here back in the day was doing advertisements for Wheaties, true sponsorship deals. So at that point, what was he doing? He was using his influence to sell cereal. So influencer marketing, even though it's kind of born differently today or in the last like 8 years, it was a term that could have been like the way that you could describe sponsorship. And whether it's athletes or teams, if you do a deal with Madison Square Garden and you use their rights in your marketing, you're essentially using the influence of Madison Square Garden to sell products, build brand loyalty, push messaging, whatever it may be. So where did the influencer marketing and sports sponsorship kind of come together so much? So I'll take you to this slide. So I think the confusion was that traditional sponsorship was logo placements, photo shoots, appearances, motivational speaking. From the Wheaties example, it was putting Muhammad Ali's face on a cereal box. And that was kind of traditional sponsorship. And then we really saw, if you follow this round to the right, with the growth of social media, that's when the influencers, the Kim Kardashians were born, the mummy bloggers were born, because essentially people didn't need a TV medium to go out there. So social media was born, and basically influence meant anyone who had followers, who had a fan base. Of course, athletes were part of that as well, but they almost got kind of left behind, which we'll talk about in a second. And then on the far side, you'll see new channels. And I think that's the future that we're also looking at, which is, you know, Twitch is not new, but in essence, in terms of influencer or sports sponsorship, it's not that widely used. Or you can have an athlete create a Spotify channel today, and that Spotify channel could be part of your corporate strategy, and that's a different way to get to your fan base. Or they could have a blog, or you could have an NFT strategy. And so what's really interesting is you've got traditional sponsorship, the stuff that we think is sponsorship, right? The Ronaldo billboard across Times Square. But then you've got all of these new channels, which is where influencer marketing sits. And that's where the convergence comes. So when you start using athletes in those other areas, it basically is influencer marketing, but just from a different lens. And so why did this change happen? Well, one of the big things was that back in the day, I'll just pause sharing for a sec. Back in the day, you had to spend, let's say you sponsor an athlete. You would then have to get a production company and pay them $20,000. You then have to buy the media, whether it's the billboard or the radio space or the TV ads or whatever else. Let's say that's going to cost you $1 million. So at this point, you've already spent so much. You're never going to do this deal unless you're going to take the biggest name, the biggest face, right? Whether it's Lindsey Vonn or Serena Williams or LeBron James, Peyton Manning. But today, because of the rise of social media and what we think of as influencer marketing, you don't need production. You don't need to buy extra time. You get those rights for free. And so what's happening is you can actually access athletes cheaper, and you don't need to go for the top guy. So if I'm launching a local market in Chicago, I don't need the biggest guy. I can take someone who really hones in on my own kind of segment, and I can now pay them $5,000 to $10,000 for a deal. And I don't need all of the extra stuff around it. And I think that's really, again, where do we see influencer marketing? It's this idea that you can use micro and mid people, and you don't need to go to the biggest guy. And obviously that open sponsorship, we really, really focus on that. Now, where do we think about activations and all of this? So of course, you know, people ask us all the time, so what does the deals look like at open sponsorship? And we say 90% of our deals are social media only, so very akin to influencer marketing. 10% are still the traditional photo shoots, meet and greets, have an athlete at your booth. So when you think about social media, let's go back to this. Let's have a look at some activations. And I think this is the beauty of what influencer marketing has done, which is it makes you think about activations that drive ROI. And I'd say that is the big advancement that we have seen. Sorry for the coloring. So that we have seen over the last kind of few years. Back in the day, you would do a sponsorship deal and you'd kind of hope for the best and you just kind of call it a sunk cost. Whereas today, there's so much pressure on us and everyone around us to produce ROI. And so I kind of pulled up these ads, activations, which we've learned from the influencer marketing space, but essentially it's all around, the one on the left is interesting. That's more traditional. But the one on the right, it's, hey, I'm pushing an objective here. I can track this. I can track the hashtag. And I think that is really interesting for us when it comes to how do we feel about ROI in sponsorship. And I'd say we've really learned a lot from the influencer marketing side of things. So it's, I'm driving sales, I'm driving swipes, I'm driving traffic to a website, and we can track that. And so I think that's a really interesting evolvement of sponsorship as well. Yeah, again, we see here two types of activations where on the left, you've got, hey, traditional, add of course, you've got LeBron James in there because it is such a big traditional sponsorship. But on the right, it's a really tough, like a really strong CTA. Go check out this new film. And you can play the film, you can track their views and everything else. And so again, what I love about the shift in sponsorship is how we're actually getting more targeted messaging, more ROI from all of these activations. So I'm gonna stop sharing there and see if anyone has questions or thoughts at this point. I would love to hear what other people have thought in the difference between influencer marketing and sports sponsorship, or why you disagree that it's different. One of the other things that we have really been looking at is demographic breakdown. I think, again, traditional sponsorship, it was more a case of because you went for the biggest guy, you were like, well, it's LeBron James. We know his fans are full of young people or NBA, global, or whatever else. What influencer marketing has done is really think about who's that audience. So, you know, the rise of mummy bloggers was because you had a lot of mums following you. When we talk about that Chicago example, you have athletes who we can actually prove to our brands, the athletes can show this, that their following is Chicago people, or it's young or Hispanic. And so again, another thing that we're really seeing with the convergence of the two is being able to dive into the demographics of these brand ambassadors, of this talent, and say, okay, I'm going to pick you. I might not know who you are, but I'm going to pick you because your audience is aligned with the consumers that I am targeting. And so from there, I want to talk a little bit more about when you think about traditional sponsorship, one of the big aspects that was great was how you would use these rights across the whole of your organization. And I think, again, when we think about influencer marketing, sometimes, no offense to a lot of brands, but sometimes there's this attitude, which is, hey, I'm going to pay this athlete, they're going to post on their social, and I'm going to sit back and basically do nothing else. And we at Open Sponsorship really encourage our brands to think about, well, I get if it's just a traditional influencer, like you're using them for their audience. But the beauty of an athlete is they carry a brand beyond just what's on social. A great example of this is if you've ever flipped through a magazine, you'll often see there might be, you know, a page and there's a golfer advertising something, and you might not recognize that athlete, but they'll say at the bottom, you know, pro golfer or PGA Tour winner. Oftentimes you'll see even, you know, in TV adverts, they'll say, you know, NBA player or NFL player, because it's not obvious to everyone. But there is there's something about working with athletes that we feel transcends just the traditional influencer, but it's up to brands to really make use of that. So a great example is we have a brand, they do a deal with an athlete. So you get the athlete to post on social media for you. Great. Don't stop there. Now let's use that content and put it in a marketing email. Let's send out to all of our, you know, let's say you're a headphone brand. Let's send out an email to our users and say, hey, check out this Olympian wearing our headphones. Or even better could be, check out the top 10 tips for starting your day right from this Olympian. And obviously one of them is like, you get into your music groove and you switch your music on in the morning and you integrate the headphones into that story. And so one of the things I always encourage influencer marketing managers is, how can you use the rights from your sponsorship deal, your deal with the athlete, and send that out to other teams within the company? A great example of that is PR. You know, we have a PR agency, and when we had Serena Williams invest in us, it was honestly the easiest pitch for them to go out there and talk about that, because the athlete drives the narrative. And so oftentimes I understand that as an influencer marketing manager, maybe your traditional influencer is not that interesting in a PR story. But now when you use an NBA athlete, go to your PR agency and say, or whoever, you know, drives that, and say, hey, can you do something with this? The fact that we've got this NBA player who's using us, or marathon player or whatever else. So there's one example. the second, and I think a lot of people do this quite well, is using the content in your own paid ad strategy or your own social media strategy. And I know that it can be quite difficult at times because your paid ads team is separate and they've got their schedule and their calendar lined up. But you know, the whole of marketing is about A/B testing. So again, like looking at those activations, if we took a Clay Thompson post and we tested it against our own, you know, what the paid social team is doing, maybe you'll actually find that they perform better, and they might perform worse. We did something with ESPN and it was very interesting that some ads performed better and some people did not perform better than what their actual content was. Third is, obviously we talked about it, blogs and website content. So you've now got this image of this athlete with your product. They posted it on social. That's your influencer marketing deal. Let's take some learning from sponsorship. How do we take that image and maybe we put it on the website with a testimonial? Testimonials count for so much. I'm sure we've all seen it when we go through testimonial websites and or testimonials, and you know, it could just say, hey, this was a great mattress from Joe Blogs, or it could say this was a great mattress and it's signed off by an MMA fighter, and that just means a little bit more. And so again, you don't need the biggest names. What influencer marketing has really taught sponsorship is it's okay if it's not the biggest name, because there's still credibility to the MMA fighter. And in fact, if it's authentic, you know, let's say this MMA fighter genuinely had a sleeping problem and this mattress has helped them, that authenticity can actually count for more, you know, than the LeBron James example, where, let's be honest, if he wasn't being sponsored by Kia, he wouldn't be driving a Kia car. And so we really like you to think about, and we call this amplification, and there's loads of tips on this that we have that many other people have put out there, but how do you take the deal that you've made, which includes, you know, one reel, one Instagram post, rights to name and image use for 3 months. How do you take that and make so much more out of it? Again, back to that ROI, which is, you know, what every marketing person is under pressure to deliver. Now it's not just up to that one post, but there's so much more there as well. So let me have a look if there's any questions. Does open sponsorship have any plans to help connect athletes looking for investment opportunities with startups looking for investment? Great question. Love the question, because currently, again, I'd say actually a beauty of the understanding influencer marketing is, so back in the day, sponsorship was very transactional. I will pay you money and you will appear in my ad and whatever else. And then influence marketing came along, affiliate marketing came along, all of these other kind of verticals that sat very separate from sponsorship. And we started realizing that actually you can pay an athlete in product, you know, especially going back to that authenticity. You know, if I have problems sleeping, what's better for me, like $500 or a mattress that costs $1,500 and you're the best in the market? So we do a lot of product deals. Second is affiliate. So hey, you know, I understand that LeBron James doesn't need the residuals from the Kia. In fact, but we have seen it, right? Because, you know, how much money has Michael Jordan made from the Jordan brand, or Steph Curry made from his Under Armour brand? But we don't see it a lot in other deals. But influence marketing, you do see a lot of affiliate and, you know, recurring, because obviously that money means something to them. So affiliates one. Obviously cash, and we say cash is king. But the fourth one is equity. And we've already done a number of deals where companies have given equity to the athlete in exchange for their name image. I don't believe we've ever done anything where it's been a paid transaction. And the main reason why is because that equity in exchange for name, image, likeness is still considered a marketing deal. The second you go into investment, we're basically doing a financial transaction. So short answer, not in the short term, but long term, I do think it could be very interesting for us, because there's obviously appetite from both sides. And I do believe that the combination of cash plus name, image, likeness rights is like the winning combination there. How do you help the athletes? Oh, sorry, that was from Rich Stonehouse. Thank you for your question. From Rachel Meng Brown. how do you help the athletes create natural marketable content for the brand campaigns? Lovely question. Again, it's very interesting because, you know, obviously this whole webinar is about sports sponsorship, influencer marketing, how they've come together. So back in the day, athlete turns up, there's a creative director, there's a you know, videographer, there's 5 takes, there's editing and all of that. And then influencer marketing came along and it was like, you shoot it, you decide what you're shooting, you decide where you're shooting it, what time of day, what the background is, and send it over. And I have to tell you, for a lot of athletes, it's like sticker shock. I remember one of our first very early deals that we did, and it was with an NBA player and a peanut butter brand, and he sent the content over and he'd literally just piled peanut butter jars on top of each other, and he just sat there, and it was like the most awkward picture, and it was the morning of his first playoffs game, and it was just, the whole thing was very awkward. And you know, we've spent a lot of time at Open Sponsorship thinking about how do we get good content, and the need for good content has probably never been more significant, because as a brand, you know, you don't want anyone putting something out there that you're not proud of. And as an athlete, it's really tough because athletes are not natural content creators. So we've done things. So, you know, our product manager built this awesome feature called a mood board, where you go through and you say, like, do you want it to be full body, half body? Do you want the athlete smiling or serious? And it's all these things that you probably don't realize that you want until you get the picture back. And then you're like, oh, I didn't like this at all. And I'll give you a great example. We worked with Foot Locker, and they had this athlete do this content, and we thought the content was great. And I think it was a sneaker campaign, but the athlete was topless. And Foot Locker came back and said, we don't want him to be topless. And, you know, it's one of those things that he hadn't thought about it, we hadn't thought about it. And it wasn't like he was wrong, but it was like brand specification, which is obviously very different for everyone. And I think that is the key thing here, which is there's obviously universally bad, but what is good for you may be different to what is good for another brand. And so what we're trying to do with this mood board and these briefs is really trying to get you to think about, and a lot of our brands actually, I would say they learn how to do influencer marketing and sponsorship through us. I think we're really good at educating and helping your first couple of deals through. And so what we really try and do is say to you as a brand, like, what do you really care about? Do you want it to be outdoor? Do you want it to be indoor? Do you care about lighting? Do you need your logo to be visible? Or is it more about being natural? If you think about natural, you don't face the Lucozade, you know, bottle on the outside to see logos and stuff. And so I think there's a lot to be thought of there. And with the move, I was analyzing some of our deals, and our most recent deals, everything is video. Whether it's IG Reels or TikTok or whatever, we're really moving towards video. Now in video, there's even bigger disparity between good and bad, but I do think what's great about video is there's not so much focus on this one image. And video, there's probably more room for it to be good, even if it's different to what you imagine. So I am actually a really big fan of video, and I think a lot of our athletes are doing better with video than they did with static imagery, which is quite interesting. But of course, if anyone has ideas on how we could help our athletes or through our platform be better at content creation, then we're all ears, because it is definitely a big challenge. And, you know, back to the amplification, we want to give you content, and the athletes want to give you content that you repurpose, that you're proud to put in your digital ads, because ultimately you'll get more ROI, and then you'll come back and do more with us and that athlete. Thank you for the question. So another one, I'm curious, does OS represent minor league baseball players? If yes, please share an example, social media links or player names so I can check out their influencer marketing activity. Thanks. I am going to ask Jeff to respond to that and share some links. So we do have minor league baseball players. And again, going back to that kind of example, what I love about the minor leagues is it's inexpensive, great value. They've still got such a great following because either they were famous at college or whatever they, you know, or not, I suppose not college, but like, you know, they've got their local fan following and they're just awesome. And a lot of these guys, interestingly, are the younger guys. Again, going back to content creation, we're seeing really good content creation come out of the minor league players or the college players, because they know that their social content is a big part of how they make money, whereas Major League Baseball players are ridiculously expensive and often don't want to do any social media at all, which is quite interesting. Matthew Barry, how would you encourage more of those authentic sponsorships you just described with brands and athletes on the platform? Really good question. I would say that there's two elements, I think, to authenticity. One is the athlete genuinely interested in you, your product, your brand, whatever it may be? And that comes across through their pitch. So, brands will put up a campaign, the athlete's pitch, and so, or the agents on the athlete behalf. And I think that's a really important place for the athlete to say, yes, I'm genuinely, I eat your food, or I use this product, or I have this pet. So I think there's part of it, which is what the athlete tells you. And then I'd say the second bit, which is great because we have a lot of data on it, is do they organically post content around that topic themselves? So for example, many athletes have kids. Some athletes post a lot more about their kids than other athletes. Now, or pets is a great example as well. Like, you see athletes who post about their dogs quite often on social, and then there's probably a lot of athletes who have a dog, but they don't really post. And I believe that on the platform, you can kind of see their top performing content, which means what also does their fan base respond with. And so I think authenticity comes often from diving into their social, scroll down for 10, 20 posts. And is there anything there that's relevant? So, if we did a campaign with Levi's, if the athlete never wears jeans, even if they say they love Levi's, probably not the best fit. Let's find someone who does, and that's really easy. And I think that's kind of, again, the beauty of being able to get into the content really quick and look for that authentic match. Obviously, we also have other things in the platform like social insights, where you can type a word and, you can type in Bitcoin and see which athletes have talked about Bitcoin or whatever it may be. So that's very useful if you want to pass Twitter or anything else. But for me, I'd say Instagram imagery is really important. Does OS first understand athletes' brand interest and then connect them with the brands? Or do you understand brands' interest in athletes and connect them, or is it both? Great question. It's more so, we see ourselves very much as the marketplace. And so our job is to create the best place for you to do these matches. And so we do ask the athletes certain things up front, and then the brand will obviously post. And what we really want to do is for the athletes to come to you and tell you why they should work with you, versus us being that kind of matchmaker. So I think it was a lot like recruitment. And so for mostly, we're going brand first, and they're putting up and then athletes are applying. But we are looking at how do we get more athlete content up front to be able to do the reverse. Sometimes you're working with athletes that are not familiar with, passionate about your brand or products. How can you get past this? Good question. Not everyone has a product that is every athlete is dying to use, or is very authentic in your life or whatever else. Or it could be authentic, but it might not be something I really want to talk about. Hair transplants is a really interesting one, obviously very focused on the male demographic. So therefore, when you're thinking about an influencer marketing campaigns, it makes sense to use athletes, not obviously retired athletes. And so you're not going to like my answer, but money is a really good one to get people interested and producing good content. And I'll quickly just say that a lot of people want to do product only deals, and I always say even putting 50 or 100 bucks to a deal to hold the athlete accountable and give them something to work towards or for at the end is really useful. So I'd say one is money, and then I'd say second is Once you've done the deal with an athlete, so once you've secured the athlete, or even upfront in the campaign brief, every company has a story. Why were you started? Was it a founder issue? Like, what's your history? Ultimately, what's the problem you're solving? And I think maybe there's sometimes what gets missed. I think people think it gets missed in the platform, but I think it gets missed in this transactional nature of influencer marketing, is potentially like the brand, the athlete really understanding who you are as a company and who you stand for, or even you understanding you yourself. And so, you know, I'd say like maybe a great tip there is to share a little bit about who you are as a marketing manager and why you work at this company. And maybe there's something within that that gets the athlete more excited and bought into the company, even if the product itself is not as interesting. Love all these questions. Thank you so much. How have you approached the issue with international and NCAA not being able to participate in endorsement deals in the States? Interesting question. I don't think we have had dealt with it at the moment. And again, kind of going back to what we said about we're the marketplace, if you can't do a deal, you don't sign up and you don't do it. And so it's a shame for those athletes, but frankly, there's 476,000 college athletes, so there's more than enough for other deals, but it'll be interesting to see that one play out. Dr. Joy Moy, TikTok has been a game changer, pun intended, for a person being their own brand. Do you encourage vids on TikTok? I own my own acupuncture practice and I have 346,000 followers. I want to utilize my following as well. Yeah, absolutely. We really are seeing great engagement with TikTok. I think sometimes athletes are a little bit behind on the TikTok game. Not sure why, maybe because it was made more so for natural content creators, and as we discussed, like many weren't, but obviously with the younger crop, the college, the minor leagues or whatever else, we're seeing a lot more on TikTok. We find that our brands are definitely really interested in TikTok as well. It drives good results. I think TikTok is really working on its monetization strategy. Also helps to probably diversify a little bit away from Instagram. I think Instagram, Facebook is where the bulk of the focus is. So with 346,000, 100%, like it'd be awesome. And again, that's a really great example. Acupuncture, it's connected, it's nutrients, supplements, like sports things. There's so much that you can do that is really authentic to your profession there. Ruben Goal, with all the analytics available on influencers and athlete creators, which metrics would you say are most important to brands, and what other non-metric and non-measurable aspects do brands look for in creators? Great question. So the non-measurable is good content. If anyone has a way to measure it, let me know. But we've tried to tag things as funny or bright or uplifting or whatever it may be. But it is still non-measurable. But I'd say good content is the number one thing. And the reason being is because you can repurpose it, you're proud of it. It's just a measure right now, which is interesting. The measurable ones, for sure, I would say are, the holy grail is sales. But there's so much that needs to happen for a sell, right? Like your website, your pricing has to be right, your business model, your everything, your retargeting, whatever else. So really the step before that then is traffic. Again, easier if you're doing stories because you can do a swipe link, but at the same time, then you need to make sure that you have a good retargeting or you're a very impulse purchase. So the one before that is probably the one that we care about the most, which is impressions. So did this content get decent impressions? We used to think more about engagement, but engagement was like comments and likes. But the thing is, like a lot of people, I think that we're in an era where, most people don't engage with most of the content. They engage in the traditional sense. Most people are not commenting or liking or sharing. Most people are just watching and consuming more so and more so. And so I think that's why impressions is the big one. And then back to amplification, you've got an impression. Can you retarget them? Can you do something with that? Hey there, Husseini. What do conversations look like with sports agents, and how does that differ from conversations with brand representatives? Interesting. Both sides very different. So on one side we have our supply, our athletes and our agents, and on the other side we have our brands. So I suppose the question is, from an open sponsorship perspective, we are basically talking to sports agents and saying, you know, back to that kind of conversation, you're really good at selling your top 1%. So, you know, you're an agency, you have Peyton Manning as a client, you're going to get great deal flow for him. But what about everyone else? And that's where open sponsorship steps in. But the price drop off is quite huge. You know, Peyton Manning would never do just a one-off social media deal. A lot of the other roster would, but it's often not worth it to get that time. So our conversation with agents is get your athletes signed up, price them accordingly, be open to doing one-off deals, because that's the way that influencer marketing is right now, and that's what we need. And then on the brand side, our conversations are all about why athletes, why sports, why us. So I hope I understood your conversation, your question correctly. I know we've gone over. I can answer a couple more questions and then we can jump off, but thank you so much for all your engagement. Hello again, what did you do in college that prepped you and the rest of the team to eventually form these partnerships and create these projects? I think most of us worked in some sort of sports or marketing background. And so we love sponsorship and influencer marketing. We think athletes and sports makes a lot of sense. And so for us, it's all around how do we create these partnerships in a really innovative, scalable way, different to an agency, but in a way that kind of drives a lot of value for the brand and value for the athlete and agent who use us. Brian Bronco, what impact are you seeing on the transfer portal and securing NIL deals for college athletes and the small mom and pop shops near campus? Example, single yoga studio near Sugar Street in CA and athlete transfers to Miami next month. You know, frankly, NIL's obviously been very interesting. We have, I don't know, Jeff could probably tell us, but like maybe around 5,000, 6,000 college athletes signed up. Again, very small part considering how big the pie is, but still quite a lot. And I'd say we, as a strategy for open sponsorship, we go a little bit more national or a little bit more not so mom and pop. Mostly again because of our business model. I mean, I think most people know we charge a monthly membership, which can be quite low, $3.99. But the reason that we do that is because we want to get quality brands who are serious about doing deals. And so sometimes that can be a limiting factor for a very small shop who wants to do local. So probably not our strategy as much. But having said that, obviously we love NIL deals and we think they're great. Again, like, what would I say that I think there's so much opportunity at the national level still, and education, how you use college athletes, what can you do with the marks, what can't you do with the marks, what can, you know, it's very confusing. Some college athletes can do CBD, some can't, depending on their state, depending on their school. And so there's still so much education from us, between us and athlete, and then us and brand, that we're really focused like mass before we think about like the localized strategy. What is the next big thing in the growth and evolution of iOS? I mean, keep driving what we're doing. I mean, we recently added music, so that's quite interesting. Sports and athletes is still our primary focus, but music is interesting. Other types of deals, team and event deals is very interesting. Basically, again, taking learnings from influencer marketing and saying, all right, we've got this digital, what else? How else can we impact traditional sponsorship and make traditional sponsorship more appealing to more brands through digital components? Right, last question from George Hallam. To what extent do you believe that risk mitigation is due diligence need to be performed ahead partnering with an investor? It's a great question. Back in the day, huge, because in a sports sponsorship, multi-million-dollar deal, multi-year contract, you were basically aligning yourself, you know, Wheaties and Muhammad Ali example. That's it. Like you've pegged your brand to them. I think what influencer marketing has done has basically said, I'm not really pegging my brand to you. Like you're almost like a customer. You're an advocate for me. And it's very one-off. It's very short-term. And so in a way, I think for the smaller deals, there's a lot less risk and a lot less need for due diligence. Now, of course, backwards due diligence may be important, right? Like if they've previously done something, you probably don't want to work with them. But when I think about future risk, I think it's limited because, you know, I get you to post about my product today. It's one-off, I get the rights, and maybe I put some paid ad dollars behind it. There's probably no trace of it apart from Instagram in a feed. So if it's a story, it's already gone after 24 hours. Now, if in 6 months' time that athlete does do something, there's very little like trace back. So I think it's a much bigger thing if you're doing multi-year contracts, and that's obviously like still your sports apparel, like these bigger deals, which we are not seeing as much of. So I think this has been wonderful. I do have a few more questions. Okay, we'll go very quickly. Be interested in hearing more about music sponsorship, creating music service. Yeah, check it out. We're still really wanting to do it. So we've, you know, the main reason for adding music was our brands are kind of similar. The buy is the same. A lot of the agents are the same, or the problem is the same, which is, you know, if you have the dollars to do a Rihanna deal, you'll go direct. But if you want to work with basically everyone else, like it's very hard to do those deals. Who knows what pricing is? How do you keep them accountable? And music's the same thing, right? Like, you don't need the artist to produce a song for you. They can talk about your product. Like, you know, music artists, like they're like all of us, like they have families, they have pets, they wear makeup or they work out, and so very applicable to a lot of the same brands. So we're really excited about our music offering, and definitely have a chat with us on that. There's an increase in what disciplines, art, sports, new age, are you seeing increase in sponsorship value, and what other sports things? And it's so all over the place. I mean, obviously esports has been on the radar for a long time. Is it increasing in value as much? I'm not sure. Traditional sports are not going anywhere. Soccer, I think, is really big. So I'd say when we think about athletes, it's probably quite aligned with like what's happening with viewership and where the money is flowing into sports. Female athletes, we're seeing a lot more with, which is great. So, you know, there was obviously the pickleball league, and then I think we've recently done some pickleball athletes. So I think that's quite fun, is to see these new sports come around, and like have their moment of glory, and we do deals in them. But let's not forget about like Olympians, even if it, you know, and that's a big thing we say, right? Which is work with people even when they're not trending, tell their story. That's really authentic. Of course, everyone wants to work with an Olympian during the Olympics, but why not use them all the other time and create a really beautiful partnership and storytelling there. Last one from Amber, thank you. Oh, sorry, I just thought of this question that was probably already answered. Will something be worked with musicians, singers, etc. as far as copyright usage, maintaining that prepped? Yeah, very good point. So right now, the way that we are thinking about music is actually to use the artists like influencers, the same way that, you know, when you use an athlete, you use the athlete as an influencer. So we're not seeing, so we've already done quite a few deals, and we're not seeing the artists use their own music in the content. It's more like literally creating content, which could be a jingle, like an original jingle for your brand. But a lot of times it's just like them talking about how your product is making their life a better place, I suppose. So I will pause there. Thank you so much for all the interaction. This was our first time trying this webinar format out, so would love for you to, you know, let us know if you thought it was great, what are the topics that you would want to cover, and hopefully we'll make this into a regular thing. I think the biggest thing to note is influencer marketing and sports sponsorship. Let's put them together. Affiliate marketing, PR, all of these forms of marketing, they are evolving so quickly that it's, even for us as a tech company, it's so hard to stay on top. Like, should you be doing TikTok? Should you be doing reels or lives? And, you know, should you even use social media? What about radio? Is radio coming back, or is it going away? And so, you know, there's so much to discuss and stay on top of that. You know, we would love your feedback, but we're here to help you. If we can educate you better on how to do influence marketing and sports sponsorship, then, you know, produces better results for you, and hopefully you'll use us more. So know that it's a messy journey, but we're on it with you. But thank you. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.